On today's episode of TWB, Justin and I are going to talk about Poona Ford, Latavius Murray, and then we're going to take a deep meta analysis on the Bills' first round draft pick, Dalton Kincaid.
You are now listening to the Watering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Justin Goddard and Andrew Chang.
Welcome in, everybody, and thanks for joining another episode of the Watering Buffalo podcast, a show here on the Buffalo FAMBase network. I'm Two Changs. Alongside me is my co-host, JGods22. You can find us on social media platforms, and of course, this episode, along with other episodes of the Watering Buffalo podcast on most social media outlets, audio outlets, YouTube, of course, the whole biz. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We're starting to see the more finalized product of what the roster is going to look like next year, which is, I mean, it's right up there with watching the games being played. So I love this time of year, and I love what's going on. So good stuff. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I can't complain. And we got to talk about some recent moves that the Buffalo Bills made. Some pretty exciting stuff, if you ask me. And let's start with Latavius Murray. Actually, I know Poona Ford is probably the one people are more excited about, but I find this Latavius Murray free agent signing very interesting, right? And I think what makes it most interesting to me is that does this pretty much signal the end or any like possible way for Taiwan Jones to come back? I don't know. It seems like they're doubling down on like bigger running backs, right? I mean, Damian Harris isn't like a bigger running back, but he plays big. It kind of like they doubled down on that kind of skill set. But Latavius Murray is a really solid football player, and he's got some pretty good longevity in this league. I thought he was going to fall off a cliff, but he hasn't really done that. I mean, he has taken a step down, but he's not like terrible, right? There's a market for this running back. And what's most interesting for me as a Bills fan is that apparently it was agreed upon between Latavius Murray and the Buffalo Bills, more specifically Brandon Beane, that the Bills would not draft a running back in order for Latavius Murray to sign with the Bills. And that's exactly what happened, which I find so interesting. I don't think I've ever heard Brandon Beane in this company do something like that. And I guess that just kind of shows a good faith from Brandon Beane in this front office. Like, hey, our word is our bond. If we say we're going to do something, we are going to do something. And this isn't the first time we've seen something like this happen. Think about, oh my God, who's that returner that we had that went to Houston? Oh my God.
Andre Roberts.
Remember he got cut? He was on the street and we were all freaking out like, oh my God, Andre Roberts got cut. And then I forgot who we put on IR, but it was just a short-term move. Why don't you just sit out in the parking lot for like a cup of coffee? We're going to sign you back to, 53 here in just a second. But all in all, I find this move very interesting. I'm excited to have another veteran in the room, but in general, I'm just happy and I'm not sure how to feel at the same time.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of points there. For starters, I would say that this probably would be the end of Taiwan Jones, in my opinion, just with the running backs that you've added and kind of some of these players that they've brought in. Trent Sherfield can be, a gunner. Sharon Neal was already having that role. You have to think some of these late round draft picks would be looking to make an impact on special teams if they're to stick to the roster. What I think is interesting about the signing of Latavius Murray is he is a little bit older, but he's been productive everywhere he's gone.
Right?
He's going into, it's either his age 33 or 34 season.
I think he's 33.
Yeah, and he's been kind of like this, okay, we got a reserve running back role kind of guy, and he's found ways to make impacts on rosters. And
Mm-hmm.
I think with the fact that we didn't draft a running back, I don't think he's going to be this break glass in case of emergency running back on the practice squad. I think there's a chance that we have him dressed for some games and he plays a role in this offense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
at the very least, he got fairly comparable money to what we gave Damian Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just competition and let the best man win, and we'll see what happens with the other guy. But he's a name that came up a ton when we were talking about, getting a bigger back before we signed Damian Harris. And just let's not get it twisted. Damian Harris is a little bit more of a thumper than what we're used to, but he's not a big dude by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, there was a
Latavius,
reason why he hung out there in free agency and signed
yeah,
for like change.
yeah. Latavius is like a full-fledged like 6'3". Like he's an actual big dude back there.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about because he's like 3 or 4 years older than me, and he's like got 3 inches on me, and he's just straight pure muscle. I mean, that's not the worst person you want on your team. I'll say that. Let's move on here to Poona Ford, defensive tackle, and it's been, widely, I guess, expressed by Brandon Bean and other content creators out there that the need to add to this defensive line was really evident. And I forgot who asked. I think it was Joe Biscaglia, or maybe it was Ryan Tablet, or I don't know. But they just asked him straight up, like, were you like annoyed that you couldn't add anything to the defensive line? And he more or less said, yeah, it just didn't make sense. There were players on there that I wanted to grab, but it wasn't a good value pick. And as a Bills fan watching this, I was just thinking to myself, like, oh my God, where are these? Where's the help? We have no one signed beyond next year. So what does Brandon Beam do? He signs defensive tackle Poona Ford to a 1-year deal. Now, this player gets me really excited, but that doesn't really change the fact that we don't have defensive linemen or defensive tackle signed after next season, really. So that's still a need that's going to have to be addressed sometime down the road. But what I really like is that Poona Ford, again, there was mutual interest, just like Latavius Murray. Hey, I want to come to the Bills. I want you as a player. I'll take less money to come to you. Let's just see how the draft shakes out. And clearly it shook out into Poona's favor, or rather the Bills' favor. It was just a mutual agreeing, like, hey, let's make this marriage work. Come on for the Bills. I know you're kind of, you know what? Also, sidetrack. This guy you ever watch Big Hero 6?
Mm-hmm.
You know how like the Big Max or whatever his name, Bigsby or whatever?
I am Baymax.
Baymax. I swear Poona Ford is shaped like Baymax. He's kind of on the shorter side, but his arms, from what I heard from I heard from Joe Marino, are like the common length for someone who's like 6'8".
A condor out there.
Yeah, the man could like do like a twist top and just like fly away.
Yeah, so there's a ton I really like about this signing, and this is a move that makes me feel way better about the draft because like D tackle was high on my priority list going into the draft, and same with D end. Like there was big names out there in the free agency market, but when the draft ends, now you're in bidding wars with teams. You're hoping that somebody wants to come to your team, and one of the most amazing things about this to me is he supposedly had a bigger offer on the table and took less because he said, I'm going to go chase down a chip with the Bills, which is such an amazing place that we got to compared to, where we used to be trying to bring in free agents. As far as the 1-year contracts go, it's still obviously a concern on the table. I think they're going to go into this season and just try to get the best version of everybody. Like, hey,
Oh yeah,
there's going to be 2, 3, 4 contracts out there. Like, who's going to earn them. And I think you're going to get the best version of all these players. I think Poona Ford fits this defense perfect. You know how our pass rush, we love to, get pressure up the middle and contain from the edges and just kind of push that pocket. That's the exact type of pressure he can get up the middle. Definitely more of a run stuffer, but he's
Yeah, I think they're going to put him at one tech for sure.
yeah, but he'll affect the quarterback as well. And just all around, I couldn't be more excited about this player. And hopefully, we see some stuff and he can get an extension. But I think the Ed Oliver trade is kind of out the window at this point.
Oh yeah,
And
that's not happening.
playing next to Poona Ford and Daquan Jones in a contract year when he's trying to go cash in and get that bag, I think that's going to be a really awesome pairing on that defensive line.
Right. Now, the next thing that Brandon Beane needs to do, in my opinion, is get some edge presence. So Justin Houston might be someone that I would be excited about. But we'll just see how it plays out, right, Justin?
I fully anticipate one of those veteran DNs being added. There's some great names out there. You mentioned Houston, Melvin Ingram still out there. Jadeveon Clowney, if that's your flavor. I'm not too high on him myself. Obviously has the draft pedigree, but it has had a really weird career.
D Ford, is he out there?
I don't believe so, but I could be
No,
wrong.
no. Who am I thinking about from the Chiefs?
Frank Clark.
Yeah, Frank Clark, not D Ford. I'm
I
thinking
think
about
he's still out there as
Frank
well.
Clark. Yeah,
So
yeah.
definitely some names there. I'm fully expecting one of those guys.
Yeah, mixing names up.
How do you feel about a 1-year contract?
Right. All right. In just a minute here, Justin and I are going to talk about the first round draft pick for the Buffalo Bills, Dalton Kincaid. But we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Bills Vader. Now back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this edition of the Wandering Buffalo podcast. I am Two Changs. That is JGods22. And again, you can find us and other amazing podcasts on the Buffalo FAMBase network. So go ahead, check them out. We also got a website going on. Would love it if you could just check that out, give us a rate review, all that good stuff. Justin, are you familiar with what a meta-analysis is?
Explain it to me.
Okay.
No.
So a meta-analysis, so the best way I could describe it is when you kind of, and in a way, all of us as content consumers, right? If you're listening to this podcast, I doubt that we're the only Bills podcast you listen to. So you probably listen to a couple of shows, right, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in doing so, you've gathered this wealth of knowledge from multiple streams of, information, whether that be articles, whether it be other podcasters, whether that be from Bills or draft analysts, all this good stuff. And what I've done is I pretty much compiled a wealth of pros, cons, and just general draft little tidbits on this Dalton Kincaid pick. Okay. And that will pretty much give you the overall consensus of how the general public feels about this pick. And then we can add our little sprinkles in. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. So
we're in the meta.
Yeah, we're in the metaverse. Well, let's just start off with just some overall arching notes here. And we're going to start off kind of weird because that's pretty much how I would say a majority of this fan base felt initially with the pick. And Pete Prisco at CBS graded it as a C pick. He said, I thought it was weird considering he had Michael Mayer as a better prospect. Now we know Michael Mayer went way later, but in a way, I think that kind of echoed how some of us fans were feeling at the moment because it did feel kind of like a head scratcher, right? But it was like one of those things where you had to sit, really think about it and go like, God damn it, Bean, you're a genius. Like, at least
Had
that's
that
how
slow burn.
Yeah, it was like, and I think what made it really validating for me is when they when they jump the Cowboys and they just like pan to like the Cowboys room and you just see Mike McCarthy just kind of sitting at the desk just going like, and then you just see Jerry Jones like it just looked like the air just got taken out of their like balloon. They were just like, I don't really, there's nothing we can do. But I'm gonna go through some of these comments here and then I'm gonna let you kind of like chime in and just talk about it. How you feel about that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so Green Light podcast with Chris Long. Brandon Beane was actually on that. And the way that he kind of made that move is that he was analyzing the teams around him, figure out what their top needs were in case. And in this case, tight end was only a real big need in terms of Brandon Beane for two teams, the Cowboys and the Chargers. So when the Chargers, when Kincaid made it past the Chargers, Beane was like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't looking to move up, but if the guy's there, then yeah. And Jacksonville already had moved back at that point. And when Brandon Beane called, allegedly, I don't know if you saw this or heard about this, but Brandon Beane called and Trent, the GM over there, was like antsy. He was like, man, I just moved back. Like, and he just started asking, he started grilling Brandon Beane, like, who do you want? And, Brandon's like, I don't really necessarily want to tell you what I want. And he's like, all right, offense or defense. And we ultimately know that Jacksonville took an offensive tackle. So Brandon Beane goes like, offense. And then he's just like, all right, I need more information. And he goes like, big or small. And then Brandon goes like, medium.
Firmly medium.
Yeah. And at that point, he goes like, are you trying to take a tight end? And it was more or less that gave it away. But he says, I'll call you back. Brandon Beane has to call him eventually after like a couple minutes and says like, hey, are we doing this? I'm not taking your tackle. Your tackle is going to be there. And ultimately worked out for both parties. But I just think that was so funny that in order for Brandon Beane to make that move, he had to analyze the people around him and basically convince another GM like, hey, I'm not going to take your guy. But he also, in doing so, he had to like basically show his hand, which I imagine Brandon Beane didn't want to do.
Yeah, just a little side note on I love this time of year where like some of the like every year it seems like we get a little bit more seeing behind the curtains on the draft and just like kind of the nuts and bolts of what they're all doing on draft day. And I'm sure you saw the one where he was talking to Joe Shane over with the Giants, and they had basically had conversations in place of like,
yeah,
hey, I'm not planning on going up this year, but if I go up, like, are we talking? Joe Shane's like, yeah, give me a call. And he's like, hey, I'm getting ready to go up. We got this deal, and Joe Shane was like, actually, we're going up too. So
yeah, I think they wanted a wide receiver.
You're on your own, kid.
Yeah, sucks to suck. Sorry, no love lost.
Thanks for everything. Bye.
Yeah. So let's talk about the rest of these people. It comes from Todd McShay, Marcus Spears, Joe Klatt, Daniel Jeremiah, Chris Sims, Skip Bayless, and of course the one and only notorious Joe Marino. And they're pretty much, I'm just going to read these out. Like, these two are going to put up big time numbers. Marcus Spears says, love the pick. Offense can be super flexible. Take stuff off of Josh Allen's plate. Home run for the Bills. Joe Klatt says, love this pick. Says Kincaid is more of a flex tight end than Michael Mayer. So that's one thing to notice, right? I think Kincaid was universally known as the best move tight end and the best catching tight end. So that's awesome. Daniel Jeremiah says, and this has been a real big quote, if the rest of the league lets the Bills get Dalton Kincaid, they get what's coming to them, or more or less that. And that he's the number 9th person on their draft board. So the fact that we got him at 25 on Daniel Jeremiah's board is fantastic value. Chris Sims, he says he's a top 15 guy in the draft. Again, fantastic value. But this is the part that I found weird. Chris Sims said that the Bills panicked because there was a run on wide receivers. But from where Brandon Beane kind of was, he was like, I just didn't think this guy was going to be here. And I don't necessarily think that the Bills wanted any of the wide receivers unless they fell to them naturally. I think they liked them, but they weren't in love with them, Yeah.
So what I think is really interesting on that Chris Sims point is when you were talking before about Bean looking at who was ahead of them and whatnot. So I've watched so many interviews with Bean. I apologize. I don't know which one this one was, but he was talking about once he saw Kincaid making it to like 21, he started
That's the
making
Chargers,
phone
yeah.
calls.
Yeah.
Right. So the run at receiver didn't happen till after that. So it's kind of signaling to me as we
I
get
thought the
this more
first one got off on
information.
20
Um,
to
I think
Seattle.
I think JSN went, and then it was the other two that were expected to maybe fall to us.
Mhm.
But yeah, JSN went to Seattle at 20. But if Bean was already making those phone calls at 21, that kind of signals to me that Kincaid might have been just his target all
All
along,
along. True.
and he was doing the chestnut checkers type deal.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't really lie about wanting to get an offensive weapon. He did get one. Let's see here. Skip Bayless, he was super upset that the Bills jumped over the Cowboys. He said the buffaloed the Cowboys, which I think is hilarious. And then lastly, Joe Marino said, you got a first round talent, newish to the position, started playing football senior high school, and a no-star recruit. All of that really, really encouraging. And I guess, what are your general thoughts from all of those talking points that I just laid out in front of you?
So I love the move, and in particular the conversation that Bean was having about making the phone calls starting at 21. It tells me that he wasn't kind of settling for somebody that went to him. I don't love trading up in the first round, but I think there was a pretty good chance that this was the Cowboys pick.
Yeah.
So I do like it in that aspect of, if that's your guy, don't let him get away. Um, I love it sounds like he's going to be used largely as a wide receiver, but I like him being labeled as a tight end and having the experience at tight end.
Mhm.
The ability to run two tight end sets and be able to run out of that. If you're talking about, the scouting report on him is that he's
Yeah,
not
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
eh,
Don't worry. Don't
not
worry.
a great run blocker, but he's willing and he's adequate at it. Okay, so you give me that Gabe Davis, who's a good blocker on the other side, Dawson Knox, and the looks that you can give between Josh Allen being able to run, the running backs out of the backfield, Diggs, Davis, these two tight ends. I just think there's so many different looks that you can get to,
Right.
especially down in the red zone, that I think it's
Right.
just going to have a
So the
huge
general
impact.
consensus that I got from all those previous comments was that overall, the Bills were pretty much praised for that move, right? And it was generally understood by all those people that this was a talent, top tier talent in the draft, and the Bills got one at the end of the first round. Really exciting stuff. Now, let's go into the pros and cons. And I know you just kind of like basically
I
said the
jumped the
pros
gun
and
on the
cons.
meta analysis.
Yeah, more or less. Way to go, guy. So I guess we'll just kind of talk about cons here. We'll just do it really quick. And I guess the cons, I'll just kind of read them all. And, you just basically said it. Ryan Wilson, he ain't blocking anyone. Brian McFadden, he needs to improve his blocking. Joel Klatt. It's not that he's going to get in line, sit down, and be a great blocker. He can, but he's not going to be great at it. Chris Sims says, and I thought this was interesting. What are you going to do on offense? Dawson Knox is really good. Are you going to move into more two tight end sets? You'll need to run the football more often. You can't just go to two tight end sets, go into shotgun and throw the football all the time. That's super predictable. If anything, this is signaling a change on how the Bills will play football, which I would agree with. And then Joe Marino says he lacks mass and functional strength and that makes him an inconsistent blocker. He's, again, not that he needs to be taller. He's modest at best as an inline blocker, not a top tier blocker again. He's 24. He's going to be turning 24 his rookie year. That means when the Bills pick up his fifth year option, I'm predicting that they're going to do that. He'll be 29 at that time. And then there's the injuries where, the back injury kept him out of the Senior Bowl, the combine. Now we know he was cleared by doctors, and then the shoulder injury. So in general, from that, what do you think the overarching concerns are, and how do you think the Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid can overcome that?
So I think it's very obvious that the biggest knock on him is that he's listed as a tight end, and there's questions about his blocking, right? That's very apparent. And you were talking Chris Sims' point of, what are you gonna just run 12 personnel all the time now? I think this move just gives us different options of how we want our offense to look. Obviously our season ended with the Bengals just kind of punching us in the mouth and us not having an answer. Like we got out physical on both sides of the ball. This gives you another guy that, yeah, he might be an undersized tight end, but he's still at least semi-capable of blocking, gives you different options there. I don't think this automatically says that we're going to be in 12 personnel all the time at all. I think we could be in 12 personnel and flex him out. He's going to run a ton of routes out of the slot. I think it gives you a different answer, and you can go into each game. You can scout the next team and go in with a little bit of a different script now that you have, Kincaid as this big slot option. You have Hardy that can come in if you want some more speed out of the slot. I just think it gives you a ton of options, and from everything that I've seen, everything I've heard, we're looking at him as a big slot player. And that's what I love about this pick is I think when we see Josh Allen at his best is when this offense is staying on schedule, they're moving the chains. You can get that, 4-yard catch on 3rd and 3 and keep the drive alive. And when you're running the offense like that, and then you sprinkle in shots, they're even more deadly. We saw so much of stretching the field last year. These air yard, 20-yard passes, those are awesome. They're also lower percentage. So
Right.
if in between those shots we can stay on schedule, I think that pick pays for itself.
Yeah, so you kind of, again, sprinkled in some of the pros here, but so let's talk about some of the pros. And I'll just, again, kind of list them off here. Ryan Wilson, unstoppable in college. Basically a wide receiver in the slot, to your point. Brian McFadden, best catching tight end in the class, route running, separating, red zone nightmare. Todd McShay, well-respected person, can get vertical, can stretch the seams, create after the catch, and is a big target. That's high praise from a really, really important guy. Joel Klatt, great at being a threat in space, red zone weapon. Tight ends obviously can be a QB's best friend in the red zone and a matchup nightmare. Chris Sims runs routes and does things with the ball in his hands that are Travis Kelce-ish. Has physical ability to run you over, break tackles, and is a better blocker. I would push back on that. I don't think that, Dalton Kincaid coming out was a better blocker than Travis Kelce. To my understanding, Travis Kelce coming out was like in a pretty established blocker. Then he became a really good catcher. So I'm just going to give that a little pushback. Shannon Sharp, he's a move tight end that has dynamic ability. Again, to your point that the Bills can move him around. This creates a lot of creativity. And then we'll finish with Joe Marino here, who says he has a highly intriguing pass catching skill set where athleticism, route running, hands, and his physical nature can help him. Threatens all levels of the field. He's proficient at the catch point. He has got basically no drops, great body control. He's willing to block. Now, again, he's not the best at it, but he's probably best when he's already on the move, kind of like what the Bills asked Gabe Davis to do, block cornerbacks and block linebackers. And the good thing is how Utah runs their tight ends is pretty much almost the same or similar to how tight ends are used in the NFL. So I'm going to ask you again, if you haven't really caught on the theme here, what's the overarching consensus that you got from all those comments?
Just a straight weapon in this offense. And I don't care what the position is listed at, where they align him on the field. he's somebody that has very sure hands, and he's able to create mismatches. Whether you line him up in the slot and the opposing team is playing nickel against him, well, now you have a size mismatch against most nickel corners. If you want to line up a linebacker on him, now we got size to deal with, speed. So overall, I just love the way that this is going to present different options. My concern is with the addition of all the weapons. Is Dorsey going to get them all involved in the offense enough? And then lastly, it's really nice hearing any player that you draft be compared to Travis Kelce. I love your pumping the brakes on that. It's similar to me to like any of these undersized defensive linemen come out there like, well, he's an Aaron Donald type, and it's just like when you have these players that are like the greatest at their position to ever play the game, like nobody should be compared to them. Pick a different tight
If
end.
everyone was like that, then no one would be special.
Correct. So do I hope we got the next Travis Kelce? Abso-freaking-lutely.
I hope
I
no.
think
I hope that we got
the better
first
version.
Dalton Kincaid.
Darn tootin'.
That's how I would put it.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, overall, do you have any things you want to add to just this first pick that the Buffalo Bills made in this draft? I know next week we're going to take a more meta-analysis dive on Osiris Torrance, which I'm particularly very excited to talk about. But any like, closing thoughts you want to bring up here?
Just overall, I was really pleased to see Brandon Beane go after offense in the first round. Just the way everything was leading up to the draft, this giant hole at the Mike linebacker. We got to replace Tremaine. I did it myself thousands of times of taking Jack Campbell in the first round. Who knows what would have happened if he was there? But I'm almost happy he wasn't at this point. Because I do think supporting Josh Allen and scoring points is your best chance to win in this league. What about you? Any leftover thoughts there?
Yeah, it's just, again, I come down with, when I think about Dalton Kincaid, is that initially, again, it felt weird. Like, why? Like, what? I remember watching it. Like, I didn't have your face on when the Bills took Gregory Rousseau. I'll never forget your face. You were just like stale, like somewhat upset, and that turned out to be a pretty good pick. But I think that Bills fans were right to question it, and I think as a fan of any team, you should question what your team is doing, right? You can't just be going in with blind faith. Like, again, trust the process, right? And I think we're at that point where we can trust the process. And I'm not saying that the process has failed or anything, but I think we as fans have a right to just kind of question the moves. And when I think about this move specifically, I come away pretty satisfied with what happened. You look at the players that were on the board at the moment, what it took to get there. Again, to echo your point, I wasn't in love giving up the 4th round pick, considering like we didn't have a lot of picks going in there. But to give up the 4th to get a guy like Dalton Kincaid, universally known as the best catching tight end, maybe the best tight end in general in that draft class, top tier prospect, number 9 player, number upper like 15 player, depending on who you're asking. What a great value at number 25. So overall, I don't really care what's his name, Pete Prisco at CBS. He says he grades it as C because Michael Mayer was a better prospect. Well, the NFL told you what they thought about Michael Mayer. He didn't go into the 3rd round, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that.
Not the 1st round. I'm not positive if it was 2nd or 3rd.
The NFL basically told you what they thought about your number 1 like prospect. And I guess the other thing I like to say is that how crazy did we all feel when Jack Campbell went at 18? Right? Well, we were just like, oh, okay. Well, there goes those mock drafts that we all thought were accurate.
Also, also a touch vindicated for like everybody that was like, don't take him at 27. It's a super reach. Like, okay, well,
You
maybe
want to
the
see me take it at
maybe
18?
maybe the Lions did like a tremendous reach, but another team out there valued him that early. So that feels a little bit better.
Yeah. So all in all, I'm very happy and satisfied with the Bills pick. We're going to talk about the next pick on the next episode, but you can always find me and Justin and this podcast, of course, by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast on all social media and audio platforms. And of course, on YouTube, you can find other amazing content by searching up the Buffalo FAMBase network. We got amazing people who do amazing work on our team. And like I mentioned earlier, we got a website going on. We got some apparel that's going to be dropping fairly soon. So I'm very excited about that. And other than that, I'm just happy. We're one step closer to the regular season. It's going to be a great summer. The Bills are going to be good, man. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
I wish it was August.
Yeah. Well, he's Jay Gods. I'm Two Changs. We're the Wandering Buffalo podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next one. And as always, go Bills.
Go Bills.